the top 5 best fighters in each division that are not ranked in the top 5. This can be anyone from the 6th spot in each division all the way up until someone making their UFC debut. All right? So we are going to be starting off with the lightweight division. We'll be doing every single division. And the first fighter on this list is Dan Hooker. I'm putting Dan Hooker at the 5th spot. We're doing the lightweight division. I think he's probably like the, 11th best fighter in the lightweight division. But, now that Max Holloway's in the mix, it's kind of hard to put Max Holloway in here. But to be honest, even though Max Holloway is not ranked in the top 5, I'm not going to include him in this video because he beat Justin Gaethje. He should be ranked. Justin Gaethje was on a win streak at the time. And in my opinion, Max Holloway is a top 5 best lightweight, period. So, we're not even going to consider him no matter what his ranking spot is. He would destroy Dan Hooker, in my opinion. Some people would say, whoa, but he just probably would beat him. But I have Dan Hooker at the 5th spot. Listen, I know that he's been on a bit of a resurgence, but the lightweight division is still so stacked that I think that there are some guys that are, below him in the rankings that would beat him. For example, I honestly think that a guy like, you know what? Man, I'm actually going to put Dan Hooker in the 4th spot because guess who's coming through? Rafael Fiziev, man. You know what? I'm putting Dan Hooker at the 3 spot. I'm putting Fiziev at the 4 spot, and I'll tell you why. Because I got Moicano in the 5th spot. It all makes sense, all right? We are going to get to the 2 and the first best fighter, but the reason why I have Dan Hooker ahead of Fiziev, and I know styles make fights, and you could have Dan Hooker lose to Moicano, and then he could beat Fiziev, but I honestly think that Dan Hooker is better than Rafael Fiziev. Fiziev may have, a cleaner style. He may look better, but I think if they were to fight, Fiziev would gas out, and Dan Hooker is still, maintaining his durability these days, and if you gas out in front of Dan Hooker, you're basically cooked. So I think Dan Hooker would beat Rafael Fiziev. I think he would break him. And I'm kind of basing this off of who would win in a 5-round fight. And I also think that Fiziev would beat Moicano. And he already has. He literally already has beat Moicano. I know it was an early stoppage, but, there's something about Fiziev versus these slow twitch grapplers. I think that he eats them for breakfast. I think in order to beat Rafael Fiziev, you either have to be a high output, really good cardio, durable striker, or you have to be a well-rounded fighter that has a good gas tank that's, pretty decent on the feet like an Islam Makhachev. There is one fighter, and I also think that Dan Hooker could maybe get the better of Renato Moicano, but I got Moicano in there. I think that, I used to hype up Benoit Saint Denis a lot, and he still is a marauder, but Renato Moicano beat the crap out of him. And I think that there are a lot of fighters that look excellent outside the rankings, like, Mateusz Raumbetsky, or Odobai, and those guys look so good. They look so well-rounded until they take a bump up, and the lightweight division just has so many levels, so many layers. Remember when I was talking to Volkanovski, and we were talking about, the difference between Holloway and Yair Rodriguez, and Volkanovski was saying, Yair, he's so unpredictable. He's dangerous. But they're layers. He was saying they're layers. I can't do the fucking Australian accent right now, but he was talking about the layers of the onion that is Max Holloway's striking game. And, that's what you face when you're fighting a guy like Renato Moicano. He's also a very tricky customer. And also, he's got no quit. You can drop him in the first round and he'll get back into the fight. Cool, calm, collected vet. So Renato Moicano is holding that 5th spot down with the vet points, even though he got submitted in the first round against Makhachev. There is one guy that I believe is very underrated, and that is Grant Dawson. Now, here's the thing. I think that Grant Dawson, oh man, dude, is he actually better than all these guys? Fuck. I think he might beat a guy like Dan Hooker. I think he could beat a guy like Dan Hooker. But I just know he would get slumped out by Fiziev. Fiziev isn't known for having the heaviest hands. I know back in the day, it was, Viking Fiziev, man, this guy is knocking out everybody. But, Fiziev doesn't have the one-hitter quitter power in his hands, but he would probably sleep Grant Dawson. Fiziev is one of these short, stocky, tree stump builds where, it's kind of hard to you're not just going to out-grapple them. Someone like Fiziev, you have to gas him out before you out-grapple him. And Grant Dawson just doesn't have the ability to survive on the feet until the end of the second round to where his grappling could start working. So I'm going to put him in the, I feel like Renato might win that, though. Who do you think would win, Renato Moicano versus Grant Dawson? I was very impressed by Grant Dawson's ability to hold down Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's just known for being a really good grappler. I expected that to be a pretty easy fight. Grant Dawson made it look easy. So I was totally wrong on that. But I know Fiziev would beat him, even though he doesn't have a good gas tank. Man, you know what? I feel like Grant Dawson, this is the case where the missing link probably beats more people than all these other guys. So, yeah, I'm going to have Joel Alvarez at the one spot. I think that Joel Alvarez, he's sort of like the dark horse of the division. Everyone's hopping on the Joel Alvarez train right now, but it's for an obvious reason. He's got a frame for the lightweight division that's really difficult to deal with. He's got like the Jalen Turner frame, but with a higher fight IQ and a really good, nasty grappling game as well. So he's just a problem for everyone, you know what I mean? So highly well-rounded, very well-rounded, difficult to get in on the inside of, and then also just very dangerous, long-rangey striking, fast. So I'm going to put Joel Alvarez at the top. I think he would beat Fiziev. I think he'd beat Moicano. I think he would beat Dan Hooker, honestly. I think he'd beat Dan Hooker. So this is going to be my top 5, although, you know what? I'm going to put Grant Dawson sort of down here. I think I'm going to change it up a little bit. Dan Hooker at the 2 spot, Old Man Hooker holding it on. Rafael Fiziev at the 3 spot, and I'm going to put Moicano at the 4 spot. I'm sorry, I just completely switched it up, but I think that Grant Dawson, he's been getting these wins, but, here's the thing about the missing link. You always think they're amazing until they actually get to a Moicano matchup, but he hasn't really had that real difficult matchup. He's got one of those like nightmare matchups against like an unranked Carlos Diego Ferreira who used to be ranked, but it's like an old man, 39-year-old Diego Ferreira. Let's wait until he gets like a in their prime Rafael Fiziev, right? Let's wait until he gets one of those for us to bump him higher. But this is my top 5 best lightweights outside of the top 5. Honorable mention, Odolbai, Raumbetsky. There's a lot of other good fighters, but I think that these guys are more proven. The new guard, Dawson, Alvarez, the old guard, Moicano, and Dan Hooker, and then, Rafael Fiziev is just sort of in the middle of that. So let's get on to the featherweight division. Let's get on to it. The first fighter that I'm going to put on this list is Lerone Murphy. I'm putting Lerone Murphy at the 5 spot. Listen, he's sort of like the Leon Edwards of the featherweight division, just one of these guys quietly just making his way up the ranks, and nobody's really, rooting for him to become champion. And, he's an under-the-radar type of guy, but he's very well-rounded. He showed some grittiness against Edson Barboza, and now he's fighting Josh Emmett, which is a big test for him. If he can beat Josh Emmett, which I believe he will, because, I know that Josh Emmett knocked out Bryce Mitchell, and I know that Josh Emmett's looking more dangerous than ever now, but at the end of the day, Josh Emmett's never really beat the best fighters in the division. He's always coming up short. He robbed Calvin Kattar. I'm just going to say it how it is. And I think that Lerone Murphy at this point is sort of at that old Calvin Kattar level, right? We're going to get right to the 1 spot, by the way. I got Aljo at the 1 spot. I think Aljamain Sterling, he's ranked number 6, which is pretty surprising. You would probably think that he's probably at the 4 spot or the 3 spot since he dominated Calvin Kattar and he had such a close fight with Movsar Evloev. But because of that performance with Movsar, we're talking about a fight where one little mistake that Aljo makes in that fight, if he just didn't make that mistake, he probably could have won, right? He seemed like he was winning that fight. He won the first round, looked to be winning the second round, but just came up short. Incredibly close fight. But I think that Movsar is a very tricky matchup for Aljamain Sterling. I think that a lot of the best strikers in this division, because of Aljo's lighter man skill, because his increased durability, because you got to imagine that weight cut getting down to bantamweight was brutal on the guy, and now he's probably the most durable he's ever been. Lighter man skill, durability increased, right? Of course, we talk about that lighter man. He's got that extra pop. He's got that extra speed these days. I think Aljo, with the championship medal, I think he beats basically everyone that's going to be on this list that I'm going to add. And, a few top 5 fighters. I'm trying to think of some top 5 fighters. Like, he would beat Yair Rodriguez. He would beat Brian Ortega. I honestly think he could give Diego Lopez a tough one. So, Aljo, man, very easy number 1 best not top 5 fighter in the featherweight division. Let's get on to the next one. Yusuf Salal. I'm going to put Yusuf Salal in the 4 spot. I think that he is underrated. I think everyone's angry at Yusuf Salal just because they wanted Calvin Kattar to get his angry man's elbow, right? I mean, it was one of the cases where he was schooling Kattar in the first round, and everyone's like, wow, this guy is pretty good, even though Kattar's kind of washed. And then Kattar starts getting into it. And you know when an angry vet, when an old school vet that everyone respects, starts running at an opponent and showing no signs of fear, everyone starts rooting for them. And everyone's like, well, now I want Kattar to win. Why don't you stand in front of Kattar and take his angry man elbow? And Yusuf Salal didn't want to do that. Now, he was running around like a chicken without its head. It wasn't the best look, 100%. But in a way, he's not just going to let Kattar sit there and knock him out, right? Third round was a tough watch. But he still schooled Kattar. He's very well-rounded. I mean, this guy completely ran through Jack Shore, who's a pretty good fighter, who also, let's not forget, man, because people forget, man, Jack Shore used to fight at Bantamweight. He came up with that lighter man skill, just destroyed Jack Shore. And he's just been dominating people over and over and over again. And he's looking like a maestro on the feet. We talk about Calvin Kattar as this amazing boxing, right? Yusuf Salal was kickbox maxing on him, jabbing him up, leg kick, switch stance, jabbing him up, leg kick, switch stance. Just speed mocking him. And, of course, the grappling gave Ilia Topuria a very tough fight back in the day. I think he is a very solid fighter. He's definitely going to have to make it to this list. The only reason why he's not higher is because the next guy has just proven himself a little bit more, and that is Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen, Almighty Allen. I got Arnold Allen in here because, again, I think that people tend to forget this guy had a relatively competitive fight with Max Holloway. He's coming off of a win against Giga Chikadze. That one went under the radar, but, he beat, I'm just going to say it, he beat Movsar Evloev. He 100% did. He won the first round. He rocked Movsar in the third round. Movsar won the second, but it comes down to the first, and he outlanded Movsar in that round with the better shots. So if we're talking about a guy that literally beat Evloev, I mean, come on. Obviously, he's going to be on this list. The only reason why he's not higher is because I got an unproven guy. And I just said Arnold Allen is higher than Zalal because he is more proven. But this guy is a little bit more clear cut. I can just see him getting to the top 100%. Whereas Yusuf Salal, there's still some questions. Lerone Murphy, there's still some questions. I have no doubt in my mind that Gene Silva is going to be a top 5 featherweight and could potentially be fighting for a belt. I know that there's a lot of worry that this guy, jokes around too much in the cage, but I'm telling you right now, it's part of his game. He's cerebral. He is cool, calm, and collected, right? He feels comfortable in the fire, and the power is undeniable. The speed is undeniable. Look at what this guy did to Melsik Bagdasaryan. Melsik Bagdasaryan, I guarantee you, if Arnold Allen was fighting Melsik Bagdasaryan on the come-up, it's going to be a relatively competitive pit-pat fight, One of those. If Yusuf Salal fights him, it's going to be competitive in the first round. I don't know if these guys are getting him out of there that easily. And I also think about matchups with like Bryce Mitchell, which are coming up, and I think about matchups with future grapplers. And I just don't think that Gene Silva is someone that's going to get dominated by a grappler. I understand he was taken down a few times against Charles Jourdain, but he was basically getting taken down because he wasn't worried about the takedown because Charles Jourdain had such little power that he was basically just fighting as if it was a kickboxing match. But when he actually is aware of a takedown threat like Drew Dober established, he was shucking Drew Dober off like he was nothing. And, I think that Gene Silva, very strong, explosive for the weight class. I think he's going to be able to shuck these grapplers off of him to knock them out. And I think he's going to be able to knock out these strikers that don't have as much heat and speed in their hands. So Gene Silva, one of those guys that's just looking so dominant, you can't deny it. You could just see him rising to the top. The only one I think is better than him right now is Aljo. Like, if there is a grappler that I think beats Gene Silva at this moment, it's a guy with the lighter men's skill championship experience of an Aljo or a guy with the physicality of a Movsar Evloev. So until we see him get to that level, as I always say, with Gene Silva, until he gets to the top 5, I'm going to pick him to win every single fight. But there are some guys, Aljo and above, that could give him a tough time in the grappling, 100%. And also there's some strikers in the top 5. Holloway, a bunch of other guys that I'm sure right now would fraud check him. But I still have Gene Silva at the number 2 spot. This is my top 5 featherweights outside of the top 5. Let's get on to the middleweight division. At the number 5 spot, I have Anderson Silva's toughest matchup, Brendan Allen. All right. I still think Brendan Allen is pretty underrated. Listen, I understand that he recently lost, and he's had some performances where he's came up short and, he's looked silly. And people don't like Brendan Allen because he's a salty Walty, and he was going at Dricus du Plessis for cracking some regular jokes. But this is the thing about Brendan Allen, and I'm not just putting him on here to defend my take about what I said about how he could be a champion if you were to put him back in the UFC 15 years ago, although we will get to that. But he is very good. He is very good. I mean, when it comes to striking, it's there. Is he the best striker in the division? No. Is he a decent striker? Yes. He is a decent striker. You can't deny that. Grappling, we know he has it. I mean, being competitive with a guy like Anthony Hernandez, again, that was a competitive fight really until the 3rd round where Hernandez started to take over because of the pure cardio. But as far as skill goes, if you're not in there with a guy like Anthony Hernandez, his grappling is going to be a nightmare for basically everyone outside of the top 5. He's well-rounded. I think he deserves a spot on this list. Now, for the sake of addressing that take, because I think this is a pretty funny argument, some people think I'm joking when I say things like Brendan Allen would be a champion if you put him in the UFC in the years, 2008. Brendan Allen is a modern era fighter that's being competitive on the ground with Anthony Hernandez. 2025 competition with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez in the grappling, and you're going to sit there and act like this is the thing. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree that he beats Anderson Silva. What you do have to at least say is that it's a reasonable thing to believe that this guy could hold him down and be competitive, or would be fighting for a belt and destroying the competition outside of Anderson Silva. You at least have to give me that. Again, no. Anthony Hernandez sucks. So what? He was competitive with Anthony Hernandez, someone that has the best cardio in the middleweight division's history, who broke the record for takedowns. These are the same guys that talk Weidman. These are the same guys that wind up Chris Weidman and talk about how he's the GOAT. He passed Weidman when it came to takedowns. I know old heads love the stats. And he was competitive with this guy. He fucked up Paul Craig. Okay, Chael Sonnen. Dinosaur era Sonnen. I know Sonnen was good. I get it, man. Sonnen was great. We're talking modern era. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. But even fighters in 2016 and 17 are getting schooled by fighters today. That's just how it is. Like watch a TJ Dillashaw striking battle. I know that people love TJ. I understand it. I get it. I understand. But even if you watch a guy like TJ Dillashaw, you put him in the cage with an O'Malley these days, man, he's getting schooled. What do you think that means for the rest of the competition? Forget Anderson Silva. Brendan Allen is a more... Why is it crazy to say that this guy's better than Chael Sonnen? It's 2025. He's beating Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis would be the best takedown defense in MMA. If Chris Curtis fought in the 2000s and retired in 2010, people would talk about Chris Curtis as the brick wall. Yep, man, nobody could take him down. And his hands probably the best boxer in UFC history. That's how they'd be talking about Chris Curtis. Anthony Hernandez, you put Anthony Hernandez in the 2000s, dude, he would literally have GSP's resume. I promise you at middleweight, he would have GSP's resume. He'd be like the GSP of the old era. It's crazy that like Anderson Silva, you really don't think that Brendan Allen could fucking steamroll the people that Anderson Silva was fighting, like Chris Lieben and Forrest Griffin? Nope. Forrest Griffin would absolutely tee off on him with his barroom brawling style. Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here with that nonsense. Brendan Allen, dude. We're not even just talking. Everyone else on this list. Like, this is the thing. Why do people act like Anderson Silva was so unbeatable? You have like, and I love the Weasel. I watch his channel. I think his videos are great. But you got guys that are still saying things like, I think that Stipe would be a tough matchup for Aspinall. Prime Stipe would be a nightmare for Aspinall. Like, no, dude. No, Aspinall would run through him in 30 seconds. Okay? I know Stipe back in the day had some grit, but come on, man. What are we doing? What are we doing, man? Anderson Silva was good. He was great. This guy was getting beat by Chris Weidman's old simple 1-2, a jab, and a freaking leg kick. And Chris Weidman's good. He is good, but he is still an old school guy. He's still an old school guy. And Weidman was getting the better of Silva back in the day. I know Brendan Allen if you put him back in the 2000s. And again, I don't need you to think that he would beat him. That's not even it. It's just that some people think it's a crazy take to suggest that a guy like Brendan Allen would be fighting for a fucking belt or schooling the middleweight division. This guy would be like, this would be the Max Holloway of the 2000s if you don't think he beats Anderson Silva. Let's just be real about, how much the sport has improved. Let's just be honest about it. So, I wanted to rant about that for a little bit. Like, can you even name me more than like 4 wins that Anderson Silva has that are that notable before Derek Brunson? Like, I'm talking about, okay, he beat Chael Sonnen, and we're like, again, don't give me the whole Forrest Griffin and, Stephen Bonner. Like, come on. These guys are barroom brawlers. Who else are we talking about? We're talking about Vitor Belfort, great win. Amazing win. Don't get me wrong, that win's amazing. We're talking about, and again, he could beat Brendan Allen. But, who else are we talking about? Dan Henderson? That's basically it. So I don't want to hear it. There's some other guys. What is it? Patrick Cote. Is that like, are we being serious now? Come on, man. Come on, bro. Come on, man. You're lucky we're not talking about Yoel Romero. We know that if Yoel Romero competed in the 2000s, Yoel would be a 50-time champion. We at least are going to agree on that, right? And this whole thing of, I think he'd be a bad matchup for Dricus du Plessis. Bro, stop. If Dricus du Plessis can, run through Adesanya counter strikes, all right? If Dricus du Plessis can go out there and take freaking big gnarly elbows from Darren Till, he's not getting slept by Anderson Silva. I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry. You'd probably get him out of there in 2 rounds, man. All right? Okay, but let's get back on track. Let's get serious for a second. Joe Pyfer. I'm putting Joe Pyfer in the 4 spot. I think people tend to forget. Now, Jack Hermanson, this is going to be a tricky one. This is going to be a very tricky one. You know what? I'm going to put Joe Pyfer in the 3 spot. And I'm going to put Brendan Allen in the 4 spot because I'm going to put Jared Cannonier in the 5 spot. Now, you may be saying, whoa, what about Jared Cannonier's recent win? And I understand it was amazing. But even going into that, we were talking about, I don't know if Cannonier still got it. I don't know if his chin's going to hold up. He took a lot of damage in that one. He's even less durable going into his next one. I think Jared Cannonier, although he won, he still is sliding a little bit. Let's just be honest. But I still think he deserves to make this list because he is one of those old grizzled vets that has a good gas tank. If you let him get going and he survives an early onslaught, he's going to beat you. He's going to be able to make the adjustments. But I think Joe Pyfer is up next, really. And I understand that he lost to Jack Hermanson. I totally understand that. I get it. I'm going to put Jack Hermanson in the same tier, right? He seems to always, the ghost of Davy Jones' locker. Well, there's the ghost of Jack Hermanson that Joe Pyfer's got to deal with. But let's be honest, Jack Hermanson doesn't really fight. It's one of those weird ones where he doesn't fight, dude. And I don't really know what to say about him. And I feel like if he's not fighting, the guy that has his ghost is going to be... I don't know, dude. I love that matchup with Jack Hermanson and Joe Pyfer, but you get my point. Can we even talk about Jack Hermanson as a part of this conversation? Like, this guy fights every 2.5 years. I honestly think Jack Hermanson's a really good fighter. Like, I was saying things like, man, he would give Robert Whittaker a tough matchup. He would give Adesanya fits because of how well he did against Joe Pyfer. But Joe Pyfer's had some time to go back to the drawing board. He's training with a really good team. He trains with Sean Brady. And we know he has brick wall takedown defense because he's just rooted into the ground. He's like a stone, Joe Pyfer. And not only that, but he's got power. And also, listen, Jack Hermanson's defense looked pretty good in that fight. His boxing defense improved a lot. Even in that fight where Joe Pyfer lost, his boxing still looked pretty good. You know how a lot of middleweights, they have a very simple striking game? Joe Pyfer has a simple striking game, but it's not like his tool bag is very depleted. He's got some nice combos. He's got a nice uppercut. He's got some nice hooks. He can throw the 2 down the middle and smash your guard. And he's got the big leg kicks as well. I think after that Hermansson fight, he's coming back with a new and improved tool bag. I think he'll probably beat Kelvin Gastelum, which is coming up pretty soon. But I think Joe Pyfer is going to be at the 3 spot. Jack Hermansson, if he wants to return, of course, he's taking that 3 spot, but I don't know if he is. But yeah, I think that Joe Pyfer, just so well-rounded, very underrated because of that loss to Hermansson, which he did win the first 2 rounds. But again, very young in the game, inexperienced in the UFC. And he's big for the middleweight division. I still think he'll get very far. But there are fighters that I think are better than him. And the first one is Cal Baraujo. I think Cal Baraujo, he's got to make the 2 spot, win over Jared Cannonier, and just looking very well-rounded with a really good gas tank, right? He's got improved striking. Back in the day, I used to talk about his striking not being that good, but it has improved quite a lot. He's starting to hurt people on the feet these days. But at the number 1 spot, I have Anthony Hernandez, and I think that's because even though against Brendan Allen, he didn't get the finish, let's be honest, a Brendan Allen matchup is always going to be a bit of a tricky matchup for a guy like Anthony Hernandez. And he started dominating in the 3rd round. Who knows what would have happened in the 4th and 5th? But if that's not a guy as good as Brendan Allen on the ground, I think we could see him be more dominant. So I think that Anthony Hernandez is the best fighter outside of the top 5 right now in the middleweight division. With Cal Baraujo, I'm sure some people would disagree and say Baraujo is higher, but they're 1 and 2, 100%. So this is the middleweight best fighters outside of the top 5. Let's get on to the welterweight division. I'm going to say we have Randy Brown coming into the 5 spot. Now, I understand Randy Brown lost to Ryan Battle last time, but that was a brutal robbery, okay? And before that, he beat Aleksei Dos Santos, who is a very dangerous, well-rounded fighter who's good on the ground. He's putting together a pretty good streak. I mean, I think he clearly beat Ryan Battle, all right? I mean, it was clear as day that he won that fight. And I think that he has finally hit his peak, and I think he's one of these guys where for the next couple of years, he's like going to be good enough to fraud check a lot of people. I think he'll sort of be like the new Neil Magny in the welterweight division. I'm going to put Randy Brown at the 5 spot. At the number 4 spot, I'm going to go with Michael Morales. He was, when he first burst onto the scene, like he was everyone's most hyped up prospect, and then he had a couple of underwhelming fights with like Jake Matthews, but then again, everyone has an underwhelming fight with Jake Matthews. Nothing but, strikes landing on the guard. But at the end of the day, he's gotten a lot better, had himself a finish over Neil Magny, although that's becoming increasingly less impressive. But I think that this guy, I don't know how old he was when he got into the UFC, definitely early 20s, but he still has a long way to go before he reaches his prime, and he's ranked at the moment, and I think he could beat a lot of these old head fighters. Like, I think if you put him in there with a guy like Colby Covington, or, I mean, who knows, a guy like Wonderboy Thompson, maybe Wonderboy would school him. You never know. But I think he's getting to this point where he's not in his prime, but he's only a couple years away. He's not the same guy that fought Jake Matthews. He's better than that. So he's sort of in between tadpole status and prime status, where I think he's sort of working his way up, well-rounded as well. I'll put him at the 4 spot. At the number 3 spot, I'll say Ian Garry. I know that some people aren't going to like that. They're going to say, whoa, he had a close fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov, and I understand that, but I honestly think that I don't think Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry are the, 2nd and 3rd best fighters in this division. I think that Shavkat definitely has a claim to being in there, but I honestly think that there are better fighters than Ian Garry and Shavkat, and just because Ian Garry had a close fight with him, I'm not just going to say, oh, yep, 3rd best fighter in the division. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about him in this one because he's not ranked in the top 5, which is kind of impressive, to be honest, how he's not there yet. But JDM's higher than him, and Shavkat is still in there. Usman's still, holding a spot. He's ranked squatting right now. So there are some fighters that are still in there ahead of Ian Garry, but I think Garry definitely is better than Randy Brown, 100%. Better than Michael Morales. Well-rounded, high fight IQ. The thing about Garry, though, is throughout his career, he's become increasingly less impressive on the feet. And that's kind of why I'm less impressed with him these days. It's like, I expected it to be the case where it would always be really competitive on the feet with Shavkat. And the only competitive moments were when it was like the middle of the fight, Ian Garry finally got into his flow state. And it was really just, a couple of pop shots at range, like a couple of jabs and teeps, and that was basically it. Back in the day, Ian Garry was like a high output, very fast, lightning fast striker. Counter striker with heavy hands, right? Getting a head kick KO over Daniel Rodriguez, getting a counter KO in his UFC debut, having like, ridiculously good volume performances. But these days, it seems like his volume has dropped off. He's slower than ever, looks lethargic on the feet. When he was striking with Shavkat, I know Shavkat's a dangerous striker. I understand that. But it just seemed like it was always a matter of time before Shavkat would land a big, strike on Ian Garry, which would make Garry want to engage the clinch or whatever. So for whatever reason, I guess it has to do with the eye test, but it just seems like his striking has gotten less impressive. I always say that it may have something to do with the vegan diet, and I know that people are going to roll their eyes, but it's just the case. It does matter what you eat, because that's going to be fuel, and that's going to help you with your recovery or lack thereof. So I don't know. I think I'm going to have him at the 3 spot. Still a very good fighter, but these days the welterweight division is so improved. The middleweight division, I always talked about how it sucked in 2019, 2020, 2021. The middleweight division was trash. And now it's really good, really stacked. Outside the top 15, you have tons of good prospects. The welterweight division kind of took over as the worst division in the UFC, outside of course, heavyweight and light heavyweight. But it took over as the worst, division with a lot of fighters in it after the middleweight division improved. And the welterweight division seemed to kind of suck. It was really like the Colby Usman and Leon Edwards show for a while. But now, Ian Garry is very good. Even though he's at the 3 spot here, he's still really good. There's just so many fighters like JDM, Shavkat, right? Prates, Morales on the come up, right? Speaking of Prates, I'm going to put him at the number 2 spot, and I'm going to put Buckley. I got Buck at the 1 spot, right? And this is the thing, man. We have so many good fighters at welterweight. Buckley, he's not even ranked right now, man. What am I saying? Not even ranked. Not even top 5 right now. Not even top 5 right now. Most improved fighter in the welterweight division, definitely. And then Carlos Prates. The reason why I got Prates higher than Garry is because I think he would KO Ian Garry. I think that his grappling still needs to be tested. I've heard Bedtime say that as soon as he, maybe he didn't say literally as soon as he fights a grappler, but Bedtime has been saying when this guy fights someone that can mix it up, he's getting taken down, held down, and that could happen. But it's undeniable at this point. Carlos Prates has ridiculous power in his hands. What is that? 5 KOs in a row, and they're all highlight reel, putting people to sleep type of KOs. Is he as well-rounded as Garry? I don't know, but his striking is so dangerous. He's sort of like an Alex Pereira, where it's even if this guy just has a glimmer of takedown defense, he's going to make it to the top. So I'm more impressed with Prates than I am with Ian Garry. And then Buckley, I got Buckley at the 1 spot because I think that Buckley has everything. I think he's obviously well-rounded. His striking has improved a lot, and I think that's also because his grappling is being showed more and more. People have respect for his grappling these days, but Colby Covington couldn't really get the better of him that much in the grappling. And not only can Buckley take you down and beat you up, he has good ground and pound, but he also has ridiculous cardio. And for someone with the physicality that he has, with the power that he has, it's very rare that you have someone that's mixing it up, throwing a lot of power in their shots, but can also do it for 5 rounds. And that's why I have Buckley at the 1 spot. I think that Buckley, I think he's the true dark horse in this division, because even though people are starting to respect his game, I don't hear a lot of people talking about how he's a guy that could be champion in the future. Although I think Usman would be a tough test, because Usman is really one of these guys that, even though he's old and cobbly, he would be the type of fighter to kind of still have it at the age of 37. So that would be a really tough test. But I think Buckley could maybe get the better of an Ian Garry, man. I think he could. But you never know. Ian Garry, I feel like he does a little bit better against shorter opponents. But this is my top 5 at welterweight. I got Buckley at the 1 spot, Prates at 2, Garry at 3, Morales at 4, Brown at 5. I thought that maybe Renat Fakhretdinov could have taken Brown's spot. But then again, Carlos Leal beat Renat Fakhretdinov. And honestly, I think Leal could be here as well. But we have to see how he does after his UFC debut. Maybe he'll have a completely different performance. That's another honorable mention. But let's get on to the next division. We're going to do the Bantamweight division. At the number 5 spot, I'm going to go with Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo still got it at his old age, all right? I know the people were talking about Aiemann Zahabi, future champ, man. I'm joking. Nobody's saying that. But Aldo is at the number 5 spot. I think he's going to destroy Aiemann Zahabi. He arguably beat Mario Batista, okay? and his takedown defense is still wicked. You know what? I'm going to put Aldo at the 4 spot because I got Mario Batista in the mix, and I don't think Mario Batista is really better than Jose Aldo. I understand he beat him, but let's be honest. He, landed shots on the guard and hugged him against the fence? Like, I'm not really going to use that as an indication of the greatest skill. Now, it is a real issue that Aldo keeps getting beat by getting held up against the fence, and that's not a good thing. Like, Aldo needs to work on that. I love how I'm saying he needs to work on that. He's like 50 years old. I think it might be a little bit too late. Aldo is done adding skills into his game, but like, you know, this guy gets held against the fence quite a lot, and it's becoming a bit of an issue. And, you know, you got to give his opponents credit for, you know, smudging him there. But I think Aldo is still better than Batista. And I'm not just saying that because I like Aldo. He arguably won that fight. And also, I think Aldo just beats more people than Batista. I know that everyone's now saying, well, even though we don't like Batista, I could just see him getting to the top. Hey, we don't like him, but we got to admit he would get to the top and be a champion. No, not at all. I don't think Batista's that great. He's okay. He had like a volume performance against Ricky Simone, but I mean, a lot of fighters can have volume performances against Ricky Simone. So I think Batista, you got to at least give him some credit. Good cardio, well-rounded, but I'm not putting him any higher than the 5th spot. All right. I still think there are plenty of people that beat him, including Henry Cejudo, right? Henry Cejudo. Old man Henry, right? Dude, I was so impressed with Cejudo's performance against Song. I was so impressed with his performance against Song, dude. He looked great. He looked like an old school Cejudo. It looked like the Cejudo that fought Marlon Moraes. If anything, a little bit more defensively sound. Still has the speed. Still has really good 1-2s and an improved jab. And even though Cejudo's not taking anyone down, I mean, he's not the best wrestler. Right? He's got a gold medal, but in MMA, he's not the most dominant wrestler. It's not going to be easy to take him down. So he's always going to be one of these brick walls, but very fast. I think he would KO Aldo. I'm just going to say it. I mean, listen, it comes down to this. Cejudo's durability is insane. I was shocked by, you know, he was taking some bombs off of Song Yadong and took a flying knee off of him and wasn't in any way affected by it. This is still a guy with a fire hydrant chin at his old age of 38, ridiculous speed. Has the ability to make adjustments. I think Cejudo is still in the mix. I'm going to put him at the 3 spot. I think he would beat Aldo at this point. That would have been an amazing matchup to see back in the day, but I think the durability would be the difference. And I could just see Cejudo weathering the storm and beating Aldo in a grit down battle in the 4th round. You know, but let's get on to the next one. I think we're honestly going to have to put Marcus McGee in the 2 spot. I know, man. Marcus McGee. He's the real Mario Batista in the sense that everyone's saying, well, Batista's probably good enough to make top 5, even though we don't like him. But in reality, it's more like Marcus McGee. This guy schooled Jonathan Martinez, all right, made him look slow, made him look silly, arguably had a better performance than Aldo, even though it was relatively close. And like I said about Henry Cejudo, I think that when Marcus McGee is going to fight guys like Jose Aldo, it could just be a matter of durability at this point. But very fast hands, good pocket boxing, good takedown defense, has a really good training camp. He trains out there in Arizona. I think he trains with Mario Batista, by the way. But I got Marcus McGee at the 2 spot. I think he's sort of like the dark horse of this division. And at the 1 spot, Song Yadong, not ranked in the top 5. I mean, this is pretty easy. On his way to beating Henry Cejudo. Granite Chin would probably beat everyone below him in this list as well, and can give ranked fighters fits. I mean, ranked fighters. We're talking about ranked fighters, but can give top ranked fighters fits, like guys in the top 5. So I think Song Yadong at the 1 spot. Right now, he does seem to be the most well-rounded out of all of these guys. I know that Mario Batista is well-rounded, but Song has had his fights where he like controls people on the ground like he did against Gutierrez, and has really good takedown defense as well. So I'm going to have Song at the 1 spot. Let's get on to the light heavyweight division. Up first, we got Carlos Ulberg. I got Ulberg at the 1 spot. He's ranked at the number 6 spot right now. So, I mean, listen, I'm not the biggest fan of Carlos Ulberg. Not that, you know, I don't like him or anything, but I just think his style is just, you know, it's kind of overhyped, right? Oh, Carlos Ulberg. I mean, like, you know, his power's kind of overrated. Unless he lands a perfectly placed left hook, he's not going to knock you out. He's a volume guy. You know, he's all right. He's all right. I think Jan Blachowicz is going to hold it down and beat him. So I'm looking forward to that one. I think Blachowicz is going to be one of those old vets that still has it. But I cannot deny that Olberg is very good. And his grappling is pretty decent. We saw him, pull off a submission victory in the third round. I forget against who, but that was a couple of fights ago. Got a victory over Volkan Ozdemir, which is a really good win. I'm going to put Olberg at the 1 spot. At the 2 spot, I'm going to put Azamat Murzakanov. I got Azamat Murzakanov at the 2 spot. I think Azamat is a problem. I really do. Densest fighter in the UFC, obviously, but also ridiculous power, some of the best footwork in light heavyweight history. This guy floats around, stings like a bee. And, of course, good gas tank, just ridiculous speed. At the number 3 spot, I got Khalil Roundtree. I know that people are going to say, whoa, why isn't he higher? Because he had a good couple of first 2 rounds. And by the way, I'm just going to say this. I think that people are overrating how well he did against Pereira. He did well, but he was still losing the majority of the first and second round against Pereira. He hurt him in moments, had him wobbled in a couple of moments, but outside of those moments, I mean, there wasn't that much success. And outside of that fight, which he lost, so we can't even talk about it as if it's like a win, just because he had a gutsy performance with a couple of moments. Again, great fight, good performance. But just because he had a good losing performance doesn't mean, okay, now all of a sudden I have to put him above Azamat and I have to put him above Carlos Olberg. I mean, let's not forget he lost to, Jacoby, and he had a close fight with Anthony Smith. I know he knocked out Anthony Smith. He's still very good, but I got him at the 3 spot. Man, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Jamal Hill. I think Jamal Hill beats him, though. I think Jamal Hill beats him, and I think it's going to be a dog fight, but I think Jamal Hill is going to have a little bit more dog in him. So I'm going to go with Jamal Hill in that one. Number 4 spot, I'm going to say Nikita Krylov. Now, this may seem like, one of these real hardcore takes, but even though he's been inactive, he is very good. You can't deny that. He's a finisher. Very risky fighter, right? Takes a lot of risks, but he has a good submission game, a lot of power in his hands, long and rangy fighter. I believe that he is good enough to be within the top 10 best heavyweights. I think he's better than Ozdemir, by the way. So I have him at the 4 spot, and at the 5 spot, Mr. Angry Man's elbow himself, Zhang Mingyang. All right. One of the blockheads, Bedtime, was talking about him the other day. Yeah, man, Zhang Mingyang is undeniably one of the densest fighters in the heavier weight classes. Very dense, and of course, he's got that angry man power where it's just like very dense strikes coming in your direction. So I have Zhang Mingyang at the 5 spot. Nightmare matchup for Anthony Smith. Like 100% KO ratio that this guy has when he fights. So I'm looking forward to his next fight, but he's just not proven enough to be higher than any of these other guys. But I honestly think he would beat someone like Volkan Ozdemir right now, and I think he would beat someone like Bogdan Guskov as well. So I got Zhang Mingyang at the 5th spot based on the eye test. But let's get on to the heavyweight division. At the number 1 spot, Jailton Almeida. He's not ranked in the top 5. He's actually ranked number 6, so this is the pretty easy and obvious choice. I think that Jailton Almeida could potentially beat Cyril Gane. Let's not forget he moved up from light heavyweight, so technically has a little bit of that lighter man skill. Speaking of lighter man skill, Kennedy Nzechukwu. I got Kennedy Nzechukwu on this list as well. You know what? I'm going to put Kennedy at the 3 spot. Automatic 3 spot for lighter man skill, Kennedy Nzechukwu. He was one of those 13 ranked fighters, 12 ranked fighters at light heavyweight. At his peak would probably be like the number 9 ranked guy or whatever. But instead of just having a peak of being at the number 9 spot, he decided, let me just beat up on these fat guys at heavyweight. And now I think he's going to be like an automatic top 8 fighter, top 7 fighter. He's faster than everyone he's fighting right now. And until he gets to the top 5, I think he's basically going to, blow people out of the water. Like, Marcin Tybura. I got Marcin Tybura at the 2 spot. I think that Tybura, even though I think Kennedy Nzechukwu could piece him up and knock him out, that definitely could happen. Marcin Tybura's got some of that underrated durability. All right, he's got that underrated durability, and not only underrated durability, but he's also got an underrated ground game. Let's not forget, this guy has some of the most TKO finishes on the ground in heavyweight history, and think he's very, very good. So I got Marcin Tybura at the 2 spot, especially ever since he, won himself his freedom, which was a big moment last year. He's a free man now. So he's getting even better. You know how they say it, when you become a champion, you get 15% better. When you get your freedom, you become 30% better. So, Marcin Tybura at the 2 spot. I got Shamil the Blob Gaziev at the 5th spot. Shamil Gaziev, dude. The state of the heavyweight division where you got Shamil Gaziev at the number 5 spot. That is insane, dude. That's insane. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's any other heavyweights that I have. That is insane, man, that a guy like Shamil, with the gas tank that he has and the, freaking plotty-ass footwork that this guy has, trudging himself across the parking lot doing pads at the Bahraini strip mall. Also trains at, you know how it is. Back in the day, you used to do some Karate Man. You did it next to the McDonald's at the strip mall. This is basically where, what's his name, is training. Shamil Gaziev. So I got Shamil the number 5th spot. Absolute monster, absolute marauder. Dude, Shamil Gaziev just funny as fuck. But let's get on to the 4 spot. I got Sergey Spivak. I think that Spivak is a nightmare matchup for Gaziev. That's the one guy I don't want Gaziev to fight. Even if it's Kennedy Nzechukwu, even if it's Almeida, those guys obviously beat him. But Sergey Spivak is sort of like Shamil Gaziev's northern doppelganger, right? With a little bit more of a stoic look to him, you know what I mean? But I think Sergey Spivak, I'm going to put him at the 4th spot. Let's get on to the flyweight division. At the number 5 spot, Asu Almabayev. Dude, I actually don't know. I think Asu Almabayev is going to be at the 4th spot. Asu Almabayev is going to be at the 4th spot because Joshua Van is going to be at the 5 spot. And Joshua Van's very good, and Asu Almabayev's not the best striker. But I just think, Asu Almabayev, if he were to fight Joshua Van, I feel like he could give him some issues with the physicality and all that. And the reason why it's easy to sort of look past Asu Almabayev these days is because how easily Manel Kape was able to school him. I mean, let's not even talk about the finish. The finish was disgraceful, by the way. I mean, I'm not even talking about just the eye pokes, which were bad as well. But the actual finish. I understand his opponent was running away, but what is this idea? Can't run away. I understand if you're doing it the entire time and you've done like 3 laps around the octagon, then okay, you can't do that. But that's worth a warning. That's worth a ref stepping in to stop the fight to warn you, hey, you got to have some more action. Asu Almabayev, I know he was running a lot in that fight, but come on, man. You can't stop a fight until someone's hurt. And he was on a double leg. He was on a single. Working his way back up, he was slightly rocked. Horrible stoppage, one of the earliest stoppages ever. But you cannot deny that Manel Kape was making this guy look foolish as far as skills and speed went. And Asu Almabayev's a good fighter. He's a good prospect. Very good. Very, very good. But Manel Kape just made him look like a simpleton. And it's crazy to me that Manel Kape is still not ranked in the top 5. His next fight better be a huge main event against, Kai Kara France or Brandon Moreno, and it better be set in stone that it's a number 1 contenders fight or a title fight, because they're not going to do Merab versus Pantoja. You just know the UFC is not going to make that fight for stupid reasons. They should make it, but they won't. I mean, what is it going to take for Manel Kape to fight for a belt? He'd be very entertaining as a champion. Fair enough, the UFC was kind of trying to set it up a little bit with their face-to-face on ESPN on the post-fight show. So we could see it. But yeah, Manel Kape, clear the best fighter outside of the top 5 in the flyweight division. And at the 4 spot, I'm going to put Charles Johnson at the 4 spot. Or I'm sorry, at the 3 spot. Charles Johnson, so underrated. And hardcore fans are realizing this, but not the UFC yet. Despite the fact that Charles Johnson's been schooling everyone recently, he still has to fight these no-names. And actually, the names that he's fighting are becoming less and less popular, which just doesn't make any sense. He's on a great win streak, ridiculous cardio, great output, really good striking. I got Charles Johnson at the 3 spot, and I got Steve Ercik at the 2 spot. Even though he got KO'd against Kai Kara France in his last outing, he's still very good. I don't know if he'll beat Brandon Moreno, but he's still really good, even though I hope it's not the case that he just had a star-aligning performance against Pantoja that first time around. I think that his skills in and of themselves are good enough to always have him in the top 10 for the next few years. But yeah, this is my top 5 for the flyweight division, the best flyweights outside of the top 5. So that is it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time.